Peppa Pig, the twin brother. One evening, Peppa Pig's family was expecting a guest. Daddy Pig's twin brother, Gilbert, was coming to visit for the first time in many years. Daddy Pig often talked about how inseparable they were as children, but Gilbert had moved far away, and they had barely seen each other since. That evening, the doorbell rang. Standing on the doorstep was Gilbert. He looked exactly like Daddy Pig, but something about him was off. His smile was too forced, and his eyes seemed empty. During dinner, he barely spoke, silently observing everyone. His movements were unnatural, as if he was learning how to use utensils for the first time. George hid behind his chair the whole time, and Peppa felt uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. That night, Peppa woke up to a strange creaking sound. In the hallway, in front of the mirror, stood Gilbert. He wasn't just looking at his reflection. His reflection was moving with a slight delay, as if struggling to mimic his movements. At one point, he suddenly turned towards Peppa. In the morning, Mummy Pig seemed worried. Daddy Pig was gone. Gilbert was still in the house, acting as if he had always been there. His voice was muffled at first, but as the hours passed, it started to sound more and more like Daddy Pig's. Throughout the day, he imitated Daddy Pig's habits. He sat with a newspaper, tried to joke, but his laughter was hollow. As evening fell, a muffled voice was heard outside. It sounded like Daddy Pig. He was calling for help. Peppa rushed to the door, but Gilbert was already there. He looked at her and slowly smiled. At that moment it became clear. Daddy Pig wasn't coming back. Gilbert had already taken his place. This episode of Peppa Pig was never shown on TV and is a deleted episode of the animated series The Book of Spells. One day, Peppa decided to help her mom tidy up the house. In the storage room, among old boxes and forgotten items, she stumbled upon a strange, dusty book. It was made of dark leather and looked very old, its pages covered in incomprehensible symbols and markings. Curiosity got the best of her, and despite the strange feeling creeping over her, Peppa opened the book. On the first page, there was a mysterious text Peppa couldn't understand, but one phrase immediately caught her eye. One word, and you will open a portal to another world. She thought it was just some made-up nonsense, but deep down, something warned her. Without thinking, Peppa read the words aloud. At that moment, the air around her turned cold and dense. The lights in the house flickered and went out, and the walls began to shake. Peppa felt an unseen force grabbing her. She clutched the book, and everything around her began to disappear. What once felt familiar became blurry and foreign. When Peppa opened her eyes, she found herself in a completely different place. Everything around her was unrecognizable. The walls of her house now looked like black glass. The air was cold and filled with fear. The house was shrouded in thick fog, and all sounds were muffled, as if everything happening was in another dimension. Panicked, Peppa ran to find her family. She dashed through the rooms, but to her horror, no one was there. Her screams didn't reach her ears. The place felt empty, and strange shadows moved in the corners. Then, in one of the rooms, she saw her family. Daddy Pig, Mummy Pig, and George stood still, their eyes empty, and they didn't respond to Peppa. She approached them and shook them, but they remained frozen in this strange world, as if their souls had been taken and left behind in this parallel dimension. Peppa realized it was her fault. She remembered the words from the book and understood that her actions had trapped her family in this world. In a panic, she rushed back to the book, hoping to find a way to return everything to normal. But the more she flipped through its pages, the more she felt that the book offered no escape. Every time she recited the spells aloud, it only worsened the situation. The entire house began to disappear, dissolving into the fog. In a last-ditch effort to fix things, Peppa read the final spell aloud, but nothing happened. The spell couldn't bring her back home. It couldn't bring her family back. At that moment, a deep darkness consumed everything, and the house was completely absorbed into the parallel world. Now, Peppa was alone, and her family remained forever trapped in this ominous dimension, with no way back. The book lay on the floor, and the fog slowly swallowed the last remnants of light. Peppa Pig. The parents have changed. One evening, Peppa's family gathered for dinner. Everything seemed normal. Daddy Pig told funny stories, and Mummy Pig served their favorite meals. But something felt off. Peppa noticed her parents were unusually quiet as they ate, their gazes strangely empty. "Mummy, are you okay?" Peppa asked. "Of course, dear," Mummy Pig replied, but her voice was soft and lifeless. Daddy Pig smiled, but his smile was too wide, almost like it was painted on. That night, Peppa woke up to a strange sound. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, as if someone was pacing back and forth. She woke George, and together they crept out of their room. Downstairs, in the dark living room, they saw their parents standing motionless. Mummy and Daddy Pig stared at a single point, as though they were waiting for something. "Mummy! Daddy!" Peppa called, but they didn't respond. Suddenly, Daddy Pig turned his head, his eyes completely black. "Go back to bed," he said, his voice echoing and hollow. The children ran back to their room, trembling with fear. The next day, their parents acted even stranger. Mummy Pig didn't cook breakfast. She just sat at the table, drumming her fingers slowly. Daddy Pig stared out the window, ignoring the children's attempts to talk to him. "What's wrong with you?" Peppa finally yelled. Daddy Pig turned to her slowly, his smile stretching wider, revealing sharp, pointed teeth. "We're fine, Peppa. Are you?" That evening, the children once again heard footsteps. Peeking out, they saw their parents descending into the basement, a place that was usually locked. The basement door was slightly ajar, and a strange, low hum came from within. "We have to see what they're doing," Peppa whispered. The children carefully followed them down the stairs. Inside, they found Mummy and Daddy Pig standing in front of a large black mirror. Their reflections moved independently, as though alive. "Soon they'll be part of the house, too," Mummy Pig said, her voice sounding unnatural. Daddy Pig turned toward the children, his face twisted into a horrifying grin. "Join us," he said, stepping forward. Peppa and George ran back upstairs, but the hallways stretched endlessly. The walls seemed to shift and close in on them, as though the house itself was alive. "You can't escape," Daddy Pig's voice echoed throughout the house. This episode of Peppa Pig was never shown on TV and is a deleted episode of the animated series The Dark Steps in the House. One evening, when the Pig family was relaxing in their cozy home, they suddenly felt a strange tension in the air. Mummy Pig was sitting on the sofa with a book, Daddy Pig was fixing something in his workshop, and Peppa and George were playing with toys in another room. But something felt off. There was an unclear sound coming from the hallway, like someone was quietly walking through the house. At first, no one paid much attention, thinking it was just the creaking of the floorboards or some household noise. But with every step, the sound grew clearer and louder. Peppa began to feel uneasy and, curious, she decided to check where the strange footsteps were coming from. When she approached the hallway, she saw that the attic door was slightly open, although it was usually locked. From inside came a strange grinding noise and faint, ominous footsteps. Peppa screamed, calling for Daddy Pig, but no one heard her. She stepped closer to the attic, and suddenly the door closed on its own, leaving her standing in front of it. Then, from behind the door, came a deep, heavy step, as if something large and dark was moving in the attic's dark corners. Peppa's heart froze in her chest. She screamed for help, but realized that her voice didn't carry through the house. It was as if the house had become distorted, and nothing was quite right. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and Peppa found herself unable to move. It felt like the steps were closing in on her, getting louder and closer with each passing second. She ran back to the room where her parents and George were, but when she entered, she saw them frozen in place, their eyes empty and lifeless, as if they had turned to stone. At that moment, Peppa realized that she couldn't escape the house, and anyone who stayed inside would eventually become petrified. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and the house felt like it was slowly freezing in time. As Peppa approached the door, she realized it didn't lead to the usual street. It led to another world, a world where footsteps were a sentence, and her family would remain trapped in this house forever. In the final moments, Peppa tried to leave the house, but as she stepped onto the street, she saw her own steps slowing down and turning to stone. In her eyes appeared an emptiness, and she understood that she too had become a part of this world, just like her family. With every step she took, with every glance, her soul froze forever, and the world remained in darkness and shadow.